All right, y'all, we are 2.5 weeks out from the Berlin Marathon, post-Berlin Marathon, enjoying every last sunrise run that we can before the darkness of winter gets its grips on us. But wanted to check in to say, what's next? What's the next race on the horizon? How is my training changing over the next couple weeks? I think a lot of exciting things coming up, so stay tuned. Cheers, y'all. How's it going? I'm Ryan, aka I Run on Beer. I love all things running and endurance challenge based, and of course, celebrating those challenges with a delicious beer in honor of the spooky season. We've got one of my favorite pumpkin beers today, and that is New Belgium's Atomic Pumpkin, part of their Voodoo Ranger series. The reason I like it, I tend to like more subtle pumpkin flavors in my beers, and this I feel like hits that perfectly, where it's like the pumpkin spice flavor, not like the sweetness, the caramel that you get with some pumpkins. Just a nice subtly pumpkin-y ale. But you'll see on here, it's not just a special release, it is a spicy special release, and that is because they really load up on the spiciness of the cinnamon, and it is just chef's kiss, deliciously refreshing. One of the ones I try to get my hands on every year. It is just so good and perfect this time of year as the weather starts to change. But speaking of change being in the air, we are now a few weeks past the Berlin Marathon. I like to take a limited break after all of my big races, kind of assess how everything went, both race performance but also through training, to start to realign on what my next goals are. Where do I go from here? And that's the goal of today's video. What's the next big race on my calendar? Quick teaser, it's road race, it's ultra running, it's a combo of all the things I love. So really excited for the next race on my calendar. But also, apart from the race itself, I want to talk about changes that I'm going to make in training. I think my training's gone okay so far in 2023, but there are certainly some challenges that I've faced, and I think that's going to mean kind of, again, reflecting on what went wrong, what went well, and kind of reprioritizing my focus in training. So that's going to be the goal of today's video, but I don't want to keep you waiting any longer about the race that I'm running. On the off chance that you would like to join me, you may have noticed I'm decked out in the Bib Brave gear, and that's because it is going to be a Bib Brave race next on my calendar, and that is the Gasparilla Distance Classic in Tampa in February. This is a race that has been on my radar, I want to say, since like 2010. I went to University of Tampa for college. Gasparilla, for anyone who's spent any time in Tampa, is a huge deal for the area. Obviously loved all the Gasparilla festivities. Who wouldn't love pirate-themed parades? But absolutely loved the Gasparilla Festival, and had heard about the Gasparilla Running Classic, or the Gasparilla Distance Classic, because my sister and mom had actually run the half marathon while I was in college. I was not yet turned on to distance running or endurance running, so opted not to pursue it, something that I have regretted ever since I left Tampa, and have always wanted a reason to go back, and finally have that reason. I am so excited to get to participate in this race. I mentioned that it's a combination of road running and a little bit of ultra running as well, because I have signed up specifically for the Michelob Ultra Challenge. Not only is it road running, not only is it ultra running, but it is also a beer-themed challenge. I don't think I could have found a more perfect race to tackle in the spring. So in February, I will be heading down to Tampa. It's the weekend of February 24th and 25th, and the Michelob Ultra Challenge comprises all 4 race distances over the weekend. So there's 4 different distances to choose from depending on what type of runner you are, as well as a variety of challenges to choose from. I mentioned the Michelob Ultra Challenge is all 4 of those distances. That means you are running the 15K and the 5K on Saturday, and a half marathon and 8K on Sunday. 4 total races, just over 30 miles for the weekend. I am very excited. I certainly have some planning to do in terms of which race I want to prioritize in terms of like which one I might be going for. Not a PR by any means. I think the goal is just going to be to survive all 4 races in decent shape. But certainly I think I will want one of those distances to be more of a goal race, or maybe 2 races, one each day. We'll see how that plays out. But very, very excited. As I mentioned, there's not only the 4 distances and the Michelob Ultra Challenge, there's 3 additional challenges you could choose from, all Michelob Ultra themed various beers from their lineup, but they basically put together different combinations of the different distances that you could choose from. You could do the 15K and half marathon, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. You could do 2 races one day, 1 race another day, etc. There's a few different options. And if you are interested in joining me in Tampa to run one or all of those distances, you can register with the code BibRave2024. That's BibRave2024 to get $5 off your registration for any distance or challenge of your choosing. I am personally very excited to be able to escape from the bitter northeastern winter. I feel like the weather that time of year in Tampa is going to be ideal racing weather, and so just very, very excited to see what kind of performances I could put together across all 4 of those races. So that is the next race that I am officially registered for. That's on my calendar. That's not to say I won't schedule some other races in between now and then. Certainly, I think a turkey trot is more than likely, and then maybe a winter race around the holidays as well. And that gets sort of into a shift in perspective as I get into training for this next race or this next stage of races. I mentioned I spent the last couple weeks sort of even before Berlin, reflecting on the races that I've run this year, what's gone well, and what I've struggled with. And what I've struggled most with, I think, is just rebuilding a substantial running volume or weekly mileage volume to hit the peak marathon performance goals I have been hoping for, both in training for the 100-miler in the spring, but then also for the marathon. Had some injuries, which was not all that surprising because it was a significant mileage increase, but especially when training for Berlin. The thing that's so tough about hitting a setback in marathon training is marathon training is anywhere from 16 or 18 weeks in my case for this past race. And when something goes wrong in the middle and sets you back, it can feel like those weeks of preparation are not wasted, but certainly a good chunk of that goes out the window when an injury comes your way, and then you're looking ahead like you're still locked into training and just doing your best to survive as opposed to performing at the best of your ability, if that makes sense. And so I've just struggled with that. Again, similarly for the 100-miler, you're in this really large block of training, and when something goes wrong and you have this race on your calendar, I was dialing it back significantly, focusing on just getting myself to the starting line as healthy as possible and not really on physically improving my paces, which is what I would really like to start doing. That was one of my main goals when making the shift from ultra running back to road races, is I really want to start pushing towards PRs again, because I think there's a lot of time left on the table for me, and time that I can make up in a variety of road race distances. And that gets into what my goal is going to be as I shift into this next block of training, as I shift into 2024 and looking at what my race goals are going to be. I think I'm going to dial back substantially in terms of race distances and focus on much shorter efforts, 5Ks, 10Ks, maybe 15Ks. I think those 3 distances are going to be my primary, but I think really 5K and 10K running. The reason being, you can get away with much lower weekly volume while still working on speed work, strength training, etc., improving a lot of those running mechanics that I hope will eventually lead towards better payouts in the marathon, but also allow me, if something goes wrong, it's not like I have this big goal marathon that's been on my calendar for months and months and months. You can always take a step back and you can recover much more quickly from a 5K. So if I mess up a 5K, I mess up a 10K, it's not like I'm weeks out from being able to try again. So my hope is just being able to put in stronger efforts at these races and start building up healthier habits, faster training, and speed work that I can then transition into longer and longer distances, slowly working back towards the marathon. That's not to say a marathon is not on the calendar for 2024, specifically eyeballing Chicago if I can get a bid for that. I still really want to hit the world majors, so I don't want to put that on the back burner necessarily. But the goal is really going to be focusing on these shorter distances so I can be racing more often, I can be running more often, and feel like I'm putting in a more substantial effort in training and getting a bigger payout on race day. Again, like I said, I think this will hopefully just be a confidence boost for one, but also allow me the flexibility that I feel like I need in my schedule, being able to balance training with work, etc. Still being able to perform at a level I'd like to perform in races without feeling like I'm too tired or just don't have the time to put the training in that I'd like. So I hope all of that makes sense. In the immediacy, my goal right now is just rebuilding back to steady training. I mentioned I took a very brief hiatus after the Berlin Marathon. My fitness is certainly still there, just building back up the weekly mileage to what it was sort of in peak training. And once I get there, I'd like to pretty immediately start building in some speed work days, some interval training, some more tempo runs, etc., using a combination of a few different training plans that I've been looking at. So that's number one. And then number two, after that, focusing on not only rebuilding the strength routine that I think was so successful in training for the Berlin Marathon, but increasing the frequency of my strength training. I was doing kind of one full body heavy lifting day, which A, was exhausting, but B, I think is not as effective as spreading out training across a couple days. So maybe having a lower body day, an upper body day, splitting core between the two, just getting some weightlifting in more frequently, I think will also have a payoff. Years ago, I set a goal for myself that I would one day love to qualify and run the Boston Marathon. I know that is a lofty goal given where I currently am at with my marathon racing times, but I just know I have that in me if I'm able to commit the time necessary to training. And I remember when I first decided I wanted to run Boston. Well, I guess not quite when I first started, because when I first started, it was just a very lofty goal that I kind of put away, and I was like, hey, I'm just going to keep running marathons. I'm going to come back to revisit this when it seems more achievable. But a few years later, I remember this blog, strengthrunning.com, if you're familiar with it. I was on their newsletter, and he put out an article on how to run a sub 3-hour marathon or how to qualify. Tons of very insightful and very practical tips to incorporate into your training. But one of the things I always remember is how he talked about one of the best ways to guarantee success in running a sub 3 marathon is to start with the shorter distances and run equivalent paces in those distances for a lot of the reasons that I just mentioned. And I think the decision I've made here is in large part due to the information that I absorbed from that article years ago. One of them being that you can just run it a lot more frequently. It's not as exhausting on your body. So you can put in more training and put in more reps in terms of races in a much shorter interval, much closer together, as opposed to marathon training where you could maybe put in like 1 or 2 peak marathons a year, but that's it. So if you miss the mark, you've got to wait months until the next one. So my hope is, again, just being able to run these races a bit more frequently and continue to tweak my training in shorter intervals to continue to improve and kind of move from 5K to 10K. He provides equivalent paces or equivalent race times for all of those distances. And I'll link to that article below as well, because I think a lot of folks would probably find that helpful. But that's sort of the impetus for this decision. That's one of the main reasons behind the goal. And also just to give me a little bit more free time to pursue the parts of I Run on Beer, the parts of running that I enjoy outside of just the training itself. I think, again, like I mentioned, after injuries and things going wrong, training for the 100-miler and training for this marathon, training and running became just sort of like doing the bare minimum I needed to, again, to keep myself healthy and to get to the starting line. And I want to be doing more than that. I want to be enjoying that. And I think part of being able to enjoy it more is dialing back the mileage and not overextending myself, being able to run what I know is a much more manageable weekly volume, and hopefully over the next couple weeks, several months, that will become a much more, even more manageable, even easier weekly running volume that, again, I can continue to build off of as I start moving back towards longer and longer distances. But that is far enough in the future. Right now, I'm just trying to focus on the here and now. And I am just so excited about this next chapter, and especially about getting back to Tampa for the Gasparilla Distance Classic. So if you are interested in running it with me, again, that discount code is BibRave2024. I hope to see you there. Let me know in the comments below if you're thinking about registering, or even better, if you do register. I hope your training, or if you're in fall marathon season, I hope your race has gone fantastically, looking at all of you who just participated in the Chicago Marathon. But thank you, as always, for tuning in. And until next time, I'll see you around. Cheers.